Oh my, this is like my probably seventh time of actually recording this entire video from start to finish, and I just can't get it right. So hopefully this last time I do get it right. I'm Carter, and I'm going to be walking us through today using Webflow, CodeSandbox, and ES modules together. And I know typically what we would usually do when we use CodeSandbox, and this is for people that have a lot of custom code, right? And when I mean custom code is when you're writing custom GSAP, custom swiper libraries, Linus smooth scroller, or whatever library that's out there for animations that you might want to use inside of your Webflow project, or anything in general, right? That's not native to Webflow. You want to use that. You got to write some custom jQuery, JavaScript, TypeScript, you name it, to make this work. But typically, the flow we are used to is going inside of our home and having something like this, right? Where we go into CodeSandbox, we copy this link, and then we write a script.js. And right now I've got an array, and I'm console logging my arrays. And once I refresh this, right, we can see our arrays inside because this is calling from CodeSandbox. That's typical. But once you are getting into very intensive development projects, that might include multiple libraries or multiple folders to segment your libraries and code into. Then things get complicated, and Webflow has a limit on how much script you can do. And if you're using CodeSandbox to kind of like split things down, for example, like having home.js, which is what I've done before, and then maybe having loader.js, right? And then whatever it is, I would then have to manually come in here and then say, well, I've got script.js. Now I'm gonna do my loader.js. I'm gonna do whatever else it is I gotta do just so I can actually use the code or connect that. And in here, I'm also gonna just copy this just so you can see, and I'm gonna call this my A and console log my A, just so I'm not writing a new console log. And if I refresh this, we should get two console logs in here, right? One for the first one for the second one, right? That's the typical way we would have to do it. And once you have lots of code, this gets complicated. So what if there was a better way, right? Maybe not the best way out there, but a better way with a little bit of maybe complications depending on your skill level. So this is probably if you're advanced in coding already or writing your own custom code, this would probably help you a ton, right? And this would help if you're probably doing things with like WebGL, 3JS libraries, like using Cretin.js, using Pixie.js, doing some custom transitions with Barber.js and whatnot, things that get very complicated. This is kind of like where you would need the Webflow, CodeSandbox, and ES module combined with Vite, right? So basically, thanks to Shei, shout out to him. I'm gonna pull his GitHub profile right here, and I'm gonna link this as well below in this video. Or if it's on Twitter, I'll paste the link as well as a quoted tweet. So in his repository, we have this Vite Webflow starter. Let's even see. Are you guys seeing this right now? Yes. We don't need Breaker Pro right now. He's got this starter, and I'm just going to click into this. And I'm just going to read through the documentation really quickly of what to do. He recommends using CodeSandbox, which means obviously you could use VS Code, you could use whatever other text code editor you want to use. But CodeSandbox is a recommendation, and the flow is pretty quite easy as well. But you could have it hosted locally if you wanted to do that as well. But CodeSandbox works because that code is going to be live. If you need to show the link to the client to look at the website, they have access to that rather than you hosting it locally where only you can see the changes with the JavaScript or code that you've written. So first thing we're going to do is clone the repo and import this into CodeSandbox. So we're just going to do that, right? And we just need to fork. We need to fork our own copy of this into our profile. And also inside of my CodeSandbox, I should say that I've connected my GitHub account inside of CodeSandbox, at least up to this point. So I have the same email, same everything, so it doesn't get confusing, all connected together. And I'm going to create a fork into my own account. And you can see now, this is my account, Carter Ogumshola Vite Webflow Starter. right? Now, inside my own account, I already have this created. For this specific video, I'm then gonna fork my own copy of this, and I'm gonna say, I want this to be Webflow ES modules. So since the forking is not working, I got it wrong. We can't actually fork the same repository inside of our home GitHub account. So what we do is create branches, right? So I'm going to go to branch, click branch. I'm going to create new branch. So that's going to make a copy of that repository, I guess. And I'm going to call this WF ES modules dash Vite. Again, I'm still fairly new to using GitHub, so bear with me right now. So I'm just gonna go into this branch right here, and this is the branch that we would want to use inside of our project. So I think if we look at this link, wait, let's see. I just want to make sure it's the same. Okay, just gonna copy this. I'm gonna go into my CodeSandbox, which already I have open, and I'm gonna click install, import repository, and paste this link in there. Hey, every time I record this video, I somehow face new problems, but let's get CodeSandbox to clone the repo, and we just gotta follow this flow of auto-detected, Node.js, and JavaScript. Yes, we're using Yarn. You could also use npm if you wanted. And next, apply and start. Okay, this is gonna take a good minute to kind of get done, so I might have to like skip through this very quickly in the video. Nice, we're on, the containers are done. Now we're just gonna install the dependencies that's been pre-installed through this GitHub repo. And now our environment is up. We've got our terminal. We're just gonna restart the terminal. Okay, terminal is restarted. Our dev is up, environment setup is done. And honestly, that's pretty much literally all you need to get this started in like less than 5 minutes. I guess this video is 8 minutes already, but less than 5 minutes up to this point, you can literally get this started very quickly. And I'm gonna change the branch right here. And I don't want to work on the master because I want to keep that master for the future times I want to use this, and I want to use this branch of WF Webflow ES modules Vite. So now I'm on that branch, right? So that's a very specific thing you want to do in case you want to keep using that repository all over again for different projects. So now that's up. This new repository also has a new link, if you noticed. So now what we need to do is the next part in this README, which pops up here, is go to your Webflow project, and we've got to add this following code to the head of our project, or you could add it before your closing buddy tag. But we're just gonna add this to the head. I'm gonna copy this. I'm gonna go into my Webflow project. Make sure we have this previous one deleted. I think we had it in here. And in case you were wondering, you could actually access this custom code also from going to settings, site settings, and custom code, right? But I have this nice ThemeSuite extension that lets me access that with shortcuts without having to have pages reload or whatnot. while I'm right inside of my designer. So that's been saved. And one more thing we have to do is we then have to go in here and copy this link that we have and just change those links instead. So instead of the local host semicolon 3000, we want to change that to our active link, making sure we still have this /@Vite-client, which all this does is it basically actively reloads your page as you make changes, right? So it's kind of like live changes without you having to reload your page. You only need one /, and also you don't want to miss this js/index.js. And this is currently for while you are in development stage, right? Not when you're done and you want to hand off to the client. This is while we are in dev. So I'm going to push and publish this. I'm going to go back to my designer. And if we reload our console, we should see this change to show buddy and hello Vite, right? Which if we go into back our VS Code, we go to our SRC and we go to our JS. And let me zoom in on this maybe a bit. Can we zoom in? Nope, it's not letting me zoom in. There we go. Zoom in a little bit so you can see this a little bit more clearly. And we go into index.js. We are importing our styles, and we're also importing this function show buddy, and we're calling this function and also calling a console log, of which we don't need all of this anymore. And in case you're wondering, that show buddy is basically inside of my starter, constant, calling a constant, right in a GSAP, and then console. We don't need this anymore. Now, you might be wondering, well, how did GSAP all of a sudden get inside of your dependencies that you need? Well, this was pre-installed, right, with the GitHub repo. But typically, what we would usually do if we need to use a library like GSAP, we go to GSAP, get GSAP, and then we find the CDNs. We copy this, and then we go ahead and paste that into our Webflow project, right? We go into our homepage or our buddy page, and then we paste that. But again, if you have lots of different libraries you're using, it gets way complicated, right? So we're keeping all of this to just one single link, which is really this one on the bottom right here that has the index.js. That's all we really need. So you might be wondering, well, let's see what's happening. Okay, terminal, that's what I wanted. So now you might be wondering, well, Carter, I need to install new libraries. Well, that's very simple. You could use either npm or yarn, but since this came with yarn, I'm just going to use yarn. And maybe I want to install split type, which we need on this project. Yarn add split dash type. And you should see split type pop up in our dependencies right away. So in the case you're using 3JS and you need to use is it GLSL? If I said that correctly, which is a 3JS plugin when you're importing 3D objects and whatnot, right? It's hard to do that in Webflow and using the script tag and whatnot. That gets complicated, but you can easily add the GLSL or any other libraries you want to use with yarn add or npm add, and that gets compiled at the end for you to use on your project, right? So we've installed yarn add split type. I'm just going to do yarn add GSAP again to make sure we have the latest version of GSAP, and there we are, we're done, and we've got GSAP and split type ready to go. So I'm not going to write all the code excuse me, from scratch in here because I've already done this a few times. I'm just going to copy and paste this. So what we want to do is we want to create functions specifically that we can export and import, and that's using ES modules, right? And ES modules is just imagine, let me dumb it down, is in Webflow we can create components, right? We could take this hero section and make that a component and just use that component on every other page if that's what we wanted to do. That's kind of like the same concept when it gets to creating functions and exporting them to use on other pages. And you're going to see what I mean. So we've already imported GSAP. We need to import split type. So you kind of have to know how to do all of this as well. Split text is from GSAP. That's a premium GSAP library. But we're going to install split type. We're going to use the AI to help us do this right here very quickly. And again, the point of this is not to show you how to animate this, it's just showing you what you need to do. So what we then need to do is we need to write an export function, of which obviously you can create a constant something and then export on the constant that you've created, right? And then export default split or something, right? You could do this as well, like that. Well, we didn't close this, but you get it. But I don't do it that way, just because I like doing my exports this way instead. So I like doing export function, and what we want to do is we want to animate the hero page, or hero section rather, and that's all we need to do to export our function, right? And at this point, we could console log anything we want. Hello, it's Carter, right? Or we could write our gsap.to animation and then say opacity, like, you know, whatever you want to write in there, right? That's kind of like the concept of export. So the reason why we need to wrap all of this inside of an export or make it a constant and then export this, I think this way is easier in my opinion for me, is that way we can then go back to our index.js, which is this one right here, and then we can then import, I think we called it animate hero, I think animate hero, and you know, AI already helped us find the folder it's in. And then we could just call animate hero, and if I save this, we should see hello, it's Carter right here in our console log, right? So it's already working. And at this point, honestly, if you don't want to watch if you don't want to watch this video, you're done. That's literally all you need to know. Is you create folders or new folders if you wanted, and maybe you want to call it transition folder. You could create transition, right, for your page transitions. And inside your transition, maybe you want to then add a Barber.js transition for your homepage. And then you could just say maybe barber home.js, and then do the same format of exporting, but again, Barber has a different documentation, so you might not follow that same process. And then you then import whatever you've done inside this Barber.js transitions page inside your index.js, and then you call it to run, right? That's pretty much all we've done so far. And at this point, let's see how many minutes this recording has been. Almost 20 minutes. You're literally good to go, right? But if you want to stick around and kind of like see how we can then actually use the animation and not just a console log inside of this, of which I said I'm just going to copy and paste stuff so we can get going very quickly. So I've got this code that basically scales in the image and does some animation on the text. So I'm just going to paste this in here. And we're doing a gsap from and our selector element data-item error image. So something specific about this, if you stuck around, is I'm not using CSS classes or IDs. There's specific use cases you can use that if it's something that you want to use, right? But for myself and for this use case, and what I've learned so far is when I use CSS classes for animations, I might have used that CSS class somewhere else, or it's a CSS class that's going to be used in other places. For example, since I'm using masked, this is kind of like how you use masked is you define your h1 and then you add a combo class, maybe uText center. So if I used h1 as my selector in here, that means it's going to animate every single h1 that I have. So guess what? I'm using attributes instead of data-item equals hero text, and you could literally write whatever attributes you want. But that's my recommendation, is maybe it's get in the habit of using attributes for better organization. At least that's what I prefer in my own case. And we're going to do a scale from 1.2 to the default scale that we currently have. And what we want to do, so that's already working, right? It's even already working already. But there's a problem we're running into is I'm not doing query selector all for this. So we want to, it's only selecting the first data-item hero text. even if I have data-item hero text on every single H1 that we've got in here. So what we would then want to do is query selector all instead. And I think that should fix our problem. And you see, live reload. I didn't have to reload my page for that to reflect. But there's still some issues we are running into. One, I kind of want to add a ease of maybe power, let's see, power 3 and out. Well, let's just write it ourselves. And maybe increase the duration to 1.6 seconds for the scale. And let's see what that looks like. Nice. And maybe I actually want to increase this scale to maybe something like 1.4 or 1.6. At this point on, you could play around with whatever you want to do in your animation, and maybe put it at 2 seconds. I might throw in a delay as well at the end at some point. And then we're good on this end. But something else we're missing is there's no overflow hidden. Like, we are seeing all your text literally immediately. There's no overflow hidden. Guess what? You could either do that inside of your Webflow, you know, custom embed code. And since we're using data on dash item equals hero text, we need this hero dash text, and then overflow hidden. Like, you could write your CSS like inside of Webflow, which some people might recommend as well, but you could also do it inside of your CodeSandbox. But let's see how it works inside of Webflow. Publish this super quick. Right, and we have that nice effect. But what if we wanted to just use our CSS inside of our CodeSandbox and we don't want to write it in Webflow? That way we can see the live updates and maybe then transfer onto Webflow later on, right? Since in our index.js, we are already referencing our styles, right? And something to note is this style has 2 periods. This animation has 1 period. You might be asking why. Here's why. If we follow this nomenclature, I guess, or this folder structure, you see that index.js is inside of this JS file, right? And then the animations is also part of the JS file, but it's a folder. So we're saying we're going to go one step and say inside of this JS file that this index is a child of, we're going to find animations, which is one step, and we're then going to find starter, which is inside animations. But because the style is outside of JS, we got to go outside twice, right? So now we're going to styles, which is why we have 2 dots, and then our index.css, in case you're wondering like what this might mean, in case you're trying to import different things, right? Again, I don't know the level of people that might be watching this video, and I'm just going to paste in our data-item equals hero text overflow hidden, and we should see that working as well on our live site. And maybe we wanted to say color, we're going to use variable, and I think dash primary is already like an orange color by default inside of masked. We should see that color change without even having to reload our page, right? Maybe we actually also want to increase the font size to, let's say, 10 rem, and boom, we've got bigger text right there. And you can see there's like a little bit of glitch in between when you load the page and when the CSS actually comes in, which is why maybe when you're done, you might want to move all your CSS into your Webflow project, or not even write CSS in here. But again, here's an option to write CSS in here, but I'm just going to delete this just because I don't like how that appears first. And voila, that's pretty much all you really need to do. But you might be wondering, when you're done with your client, when you're done with the project and you want to hop back to the client. You don't want to deal with still having to manage this CodeSandbox, virtual environment. And also this literally does not run forever. So what's been built already inside of this repository, thanks to Shei, is either the build, yarn-build, which he basically talks about right here. And it says it again, CodeSandbox don't run forever. So you're gonna build your own project for production by running yarn-build and then host the generated index.js somewhere else, of which you could even do a index.txt if you want to host it inside of Webflow, but then you might not be able to manage different versions and have to go through a manual process if you wanted to do that, right? So first of all, what we need to do is we're done with our project. We want to offload to the client. We're going to run yarn build. And voila, all our code has been compiled, including our node modules, all these different things, GSAP, split type, Vite, whatever it is, they've all been compiled into a single index inside of your dist folder, right? It's been compiled already. As you can see, we can still see some of our CSS that we included, right? But this is like a minified version of this. But some problem I've ran into is sometimes you are unable to commit everything inside of GitHub. So I'm just gonna say v1 commit. And it's saying I'm not able to finish the commit. And that's just because some paths are ignored by my git ignore files, basically in my src/dist. And I personally do not want that to change. If you want that to change, you can go in and kind of like edit your git ignore files, which you can find in here, right? You can go back and edit your git ignore files and what you want it to ignore or not ignore when you're pushing into GitHub, right? So that's preference. What I like to do on my own end is, since this is my final file that I need, right? Index.js, I'm just gonna go back to my commits and I'm not gonna include this one right here, this src dist. I'm not gonna include that in my commits since I don't want to run into that error, right? So I'm just gonna hit commit and push. And now all my commits and changes have been made to my specific branch called Webflow ES modules Vite, right? So now if I go back into my Webflow ES modules, again, I have, see, this automatically notifies you in GitHub that, hey, we've already pushed something into this. And if we go into our src and we go into JS, we should actually see some updates. Wait, we don't want to be looking at Bulky Studio. That's not what we're looking at. We should be looking at this instead. Sorry. So now we have this done, and I can then go to my branch, my Webflow ES modules branch, and then, okay, so I was on the wrong one. I was on Shay's profile, not mine, so things to note is now I'm back in my own profile. I'm gonna just walk you through this again, go through my repository, and find Vite Webflow starter. And in this, I have a branch. I mistakenly made a pull request to the original one, which I should probably revert. Now I can go into my Webflow ES modules branch. You see it's been updated 2 minutes ago, and all my code is literally in there, right? All the new things I updated is already inside of GitHub. You can see the transitions. If you go to animation, the new code we wrote is inside, right? So that's fine. But what we want to do is we want to use GitHub to basically host our code, our final code. And since I'm already ignoring this dist file, it might get ignored, and I don't want to change that at this point, just because I might need to use this again. So I'm going to edit this file, and I'm going to go back in here, and I'm just going to Command or Control A, copy all of this from the dist, right? We're inside of the dist and index.js. And this is the final build when we run yarn build. I'm gonna run that again. Yarn build is done. So this has been updated. So I'm gonna copy this, Control A, Command A, copy this, go back into my GitHub. I'm just gonna Command Control A, delete all of this, and then update the new one. And I'm gonna say updated index.js manually and commit changes just to that branch, right? And now you could see that this has now been updated. Now, let's say you're done, you want to hand over to the client. You can't just use this GitHub link, to be honest. So there's something nice you can use called JS Deliver, right? Instead of you just copying your GitHub link and then using that in place of this, what you want to do is use JS Deliver, click on Tools, and then you could see GitHub right here, and you want to paste your GitHub link inside this specific dist/index.js, right? This is very important, right? When you're inside of this file, and just copy this JS Deliver link, and you can see this as the branch that we've created, right? Not the master branch. And also, if you're working on a project, you can create a branch or different branches for different reasons, right? To kind of like manage different versions of your project as well, if that's what you wanted to do. But that's kind of like in you learn GitHub. Again, I'm not a pro at GitHub, so bear with me. I'm just gonna copy this, go back into my Webflow project, and I'm gonna change all of this into, I'm gonna change this link right here into that. And we shouldn't need this Vite at the top anymore, the Vite client, because again, we're sending this to the client, we're done. And if we hit publish, if we did this right, our animations, CSS should still be working if we did this right. And let's inspect and see what's going wrong. Wait, I copied the GitHub, not exactly. So you can use the GitHub, you got to use the JS Deliver. So I copied the wrong one. So I got to click copy on this JS Deliver link and paste this instead, not the GitHub. And we're gonna hit publish. And if we refresh, we should have some success right there. And there you go, right? So it's working perfectly fine. And that's sort of like how you can, when you're done with your project, you know, send it to the client and do it this way and host it on your GitHub. Instead, something to note as well is if you want to make changes, JS Deliver there's a cache of probably 24 to 48 hours, I think, to where your changes would not reflect if you make new updates. So let's say I went in here and what's the word? If I go into my styles and I said, wait, font size or something, and I wanted my font size to be 10 REM instead, and I save this, then I'm like, I want to give it back to the client, and I run yarn-build. My build is done. I go into my dist, I copy this, and I go back in here, I click edit, and I paste, and I commit changes. I'm going to say update index.js, font size, H1, right? This is up to you to write your commit message. It still use that same JS Deliver link. You don't have to do that same process all over again. But what we're going to notice is this is not going to get updated because there's a cache, again, for 24 to 48 hours. And something you could do that I haven't probably tested is purge cache as well. And you can then copy this link. You could try this. Click purge. Again, this doesn't work perfectly. Also copy your GitHub just in case. And get that purged as well. Just gonna delete this. So we can't purge this GitHub. Actually, we can only purge the CDN. So it says success. It's been purged. Let's try the reload. Let's do Control-Shift-R or Command-Shift-R. So again, the purge, like I said, is not perfect. So you would maybe have to make a separate branch of that, or make a separate version and start managing versions of index.js v1, index.js v2 at the end. But that's pretty much the process of using some custom ES modules and whatnot. And this would be very beneficial when you're doing complex development like Three.js, Barber.js, you name it, WebGL, that you need different libraries to make it work. But if you're doing something simpler, just go with a simple CodeSandbox integration. When you're done, compile your code into a TXT file, upload it into Webflow, and use it from there on, right? So there's multiple ways to skin the cow, I guess, but this is just one way that works when you have really code-intensive projects. Let me know what else you want to see. If you want to actually see me use this in different ways, maybe with Barber.js, with Three.js, Curtain.js, name it, and maybe I'll make more videos on how I'm using this in an actual project. And I have a new project as well that will probably be coming out by next month, March, where I actually use this, and maybe I'll do another video of the back end of how that project worked and how things were set up. Again, thanks to Shay for creating this GitHub repo to use. It's been massive for me on new projects, and I hope you guys had a good one watching this video. Bye-bye.